Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter 1 of Hakuoki. Let's find out what happened to Chizuru. Chapter 1. January 1864. Was it morning? What had happened to me? Ah, yes, right. All at once the events of the previous night rushed back. If only this was my room, I thought. They had tied me up quite well, so all I could do was wriggle around in the bed, twisting the blankets around me. I wished, pointlessly I knew, that I were back home, waking up on my warm futon. If only this were all a very strange nightmare, but it was not. I had met those men the night before, and they had taken me with them to the headquarters of the Shinsengumi. Shinsengumi are a military unit made up of ronin, the purpose of which was to restore public order in Kyoto. What will happen to me now? I sighed and lay down to await my fate. It was at that moment that the door slid open and a kind-looking man stepped through. "I see you've woken up." With a soft smile, he introduced himself as Inoue. "I'm sorry we have to treat you this way. Hold on a moment, I'll loosen the ropes, all right?" His smile quirked as he removed my ropes, working quickly and skillfully. My wrists, however, were left bound. Thank you." I bowed, and he let out a short laugh. "Now, if you'll follow me. They've been discussing what to do with you since morning. For now, they've decided to hear what exactly it was you saw last night." "Okay," I nodded and did my best to stand up. My body's still a bit unsteady after being tied up all night. The man who called himself Inoue was very polite and almost kind, but it was quite clear that I was to do as I was told. He must have been able to guess my thoughts, because he smiled at me and winked. "You don't need to worry. I know they seem scary, but they're all really very nice." Oh, I wasn't sure what to think of that. Even at home I'd heard rumours of the vicious Shinsengumi. They weren't pleasant rumours. It was hard to imagine that the people in charge of such an organisation were nice. Inoue led me to a room and opened the door. I stepped inside and found myself surrounded by the leaders of the Shinsengumi. Their eyes dug into me like so many knives. I froze just past a threshold and swallowed. "Good morning, I hope you slept well," says Suji Okita. I remembered him, Okita. Perhaps it was because I was surrounded by strange men, but it was somehow comforting to see a face I recognized, even if it was the face of a rather frightening man who was almost certainly willing and able to kill me. Well, it wasn't particularly comfortable. I chose my words carefully. "Really?" His face twisted sideways into a grin. "Because when I went to have a look at you earlier, you didn't budge, no matter what I poked." "Wait, what?" Okita's grin widened as my face turned red. Saito rolled his eyes. "He's only teasing you," said Saito. "Soji didn't go anywhere near your room." Quite silent, I stared at Okita. With his grin still playing about his face, he glanced over at Saito. I just wanted to see you squirm a little. Not very nice of you, Hajime, calling me out like that. I don't think Saito did anything wrong. You, on the other hand... Shut it. You sound like a bunch of kids, said Hijikata. Hijikata's voice brooked no further insubordination. Okita shrugged and was silent, but the smile stayed in his eyes. So, Hijikata, this is your witness? The man who spoke was, well, he looked more like a boy than a man. I'd imagined the leaders of the Shinsengumi to be old, or at least middle-aged men. But they all looked quite young. In fact, they looked rather like a group of young thugs. He's a real stick, eh? Just a kid. That was Todo. Heisuke Todo, the youngest captain. On our way from my bed, Inoue had given me a brief description of the people I was about to meet. Supposedly, Todo was the youngest captain in the Shinsengumi. You're calling him a kid, Heisuke? That's rich, he chuckled as he spoke. But the way he looked at me suggested that there was little he missed, despite his humour. Right you are. To anybody else, I'll bet the two of you just look like another pair of scrawny little brats. The man across from him nodded with brows drawn as if he was quite serious about the subject. However, I remembered Inoue telling me that two of the men, in particular, were somewhat immature, to put it nicely. He had said the one with short hair was Nagakura, and the other with longer hair was Harada. Leave off, you grumpy old bastards, said Todo. The hell I will, boy. You think you can get away with talking to us like that? Besides, said Harada, I'm hardly mature enough to be called old. Shinpachi maybe, but not me. You son of a bitch, said Nagakura. I thought we were friends. Ha ha ha, said Todo. Come on, Shin, would an adult get so worked up over something like that? Their back and forth had the feel of a routine that long predated my arrival, but they couldn't quite hide the odd, inquisitive glance in my direction. I could sense something other than simple curiosity, though, a feeling of animosity, or resentment perhaps. Despite their cheerful levity, they had not forgiven my presence among them. Suddenly, I wanted very much to go home. I wanted to leave that place and never return. My chest tightened and I looked down at the floor, hoping that I might just wake up at home in my bed. I apologize for all of this frightening behavior. Please don't give them the pleasure of unsettling you. Oh! His voice was calm and warm, and I felt myself relax, even if only a little. Are you serious? Said Hijikata. You're the scariest out of all of us, Sanan. Keisuke Sanan was a colonel in the Shinsengumi. There was the faintest trace of a smirk on Hijikata's lips. As he finished speaking, the rest of the men nodded solemnly in agreement. I found it hard to believe this man could be as scary as they all seemed to think. Oh, how crude, said Sanan. I can understand their feelings, but that even our demon of a commander should think so. The man called Sanan smiled as he spoke and leaned back, his riposte delivered. Hijikata said nothing, but his own smile did not leave his face. You're lucky to have a friend like Sanan, Toshi. Hijikata and Sanan had sounded so cold when they'd spoken to one another. Not what I would have called friendly. Still, the man who had spoken had certainly sounded as though he thought they were friends. Oh, my apologies. I haven't introduced myself. I am Isami Kondo, chief of the Shinsengumi. The most important man in the Shinsengumi, then. Toshi over there is the commander, and Sanan is our colonel. Ah, Kondo, said Hijikata. Why are you telling him all this? Said Kondo. Why, do you think it's a bad idea? Well, unless you really think this kid needs to know all our secrets, said Nagakura. Maybe you need to keep your mouth shut. Exactly, said Todo. Why bother anyway? We don't owe this kid anything. Harada glanced over at Kondo and let out a bark of laughter. True, but it's not like telling him will hurt us. Kondo had looked rather disappointed when Hijikata spoke, but he perked up at Harada's words. I'd scarcely known him for 5 minutes, but already I could see that he was well liked by his men. He had that sort of charisma that simply drew you in. A man who was impossible to hate. Well, said Kondo, let's get back to the business at hand. Can you run through what happened last night? Kondo's glance moved to Saito, who gave a small nod and began to speak. Last night we were on patrol when we encountered some wandering Ronin. They drew steel, so we fought. Some of our men subdued the Ronin, but in doing so exposed their failure. As he finished, Saito turned to look at me. I swallowed and forced my mouth to open. I didn't see anything. Hijikata softened a little at my response, but Saito remained expressionless, and the smile on Okita's face didn't change. Who? Said Todo. You sure you didn't see anything? Yes, I didn't see anything. I hoped that if I said it enough times they might start to believe me. Really, said Todo. Well, if that's true, then I don't see what the problem is. Hold on a minute, said Nagakura. I thought Soji said you helped out some of our men or something. No, that's not true. I glanced over at Okita, but his smile still hadn't changed. Whatever he was thinking was a mystery to me. I was running away from the Ronin. And then some people with Shinsengumi uniforms showed up. Really, they sort of rescued me. Nagakura spoke. Then that means you saw them slicing up those Ronin, right? I couldn't exactly deny that. But I knew that if I just shut up then, they'd know for sure that I was lying. So, said Harada, in other words, you actually saw everything, the whole ugly business. I was completely at a loss. You've got an honest heart, that's not really a bad thing, but I wasn't sure what to make of Harada's words. My presence had not been a good thing for the Shinsengumi. Would their next words be the ones that condemned me to death for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? My voice shook, but I knew I had to try. I won't tell anyone, I promise. It seems unlikely this attack was mere chance, said Sanan. Then again, I have no reason to think you're an enemy either. Even if you do not intend to tell anyone, you could be captured, interrogated. I doubt you could withstand torture. I whimpered. His voice was still warm, but his words were cold, and I began to feel my chances at life slip away. It's easy enough to stay quiet, said Saito. But if someone should try to coerce you, you've no reason to keep our secrets. We don't have any kind of guarantee, said Okita, that you'll keep your word. It wouldn't be very smart to just let you go. They had a point, but... Let's just kill the kid, said Okita. You want to keep someone quiet? That's the only sure way. But... I looked desperately at Kondo, who gave Okita a reproving look. Don't be so cold, Soji, said Kondo. What do we gain by murdering a civilian? Okita's smile disappeared, and he looked down at the floor. Oh, don't give me that look. I was just kidding. Then perhaps it should have sounded like it, said Saito. Okita made an attempt at a derisive snort and looked intently at a wall, his face slightly red. But surely, said Inoue, there must be something we can do. After all, we're talking about a child. I've no wish to kill him either, said Sanan, but we can't discount the chance that he could reveal information about us. Sanan paused for a moment, his brows furrowed, then turned to Hijikata. I would like to hear the commander's opinion. With the responsibility of his position invoked, Hijikata had no choice. He sighed and glanced around the room. Last night, said Hijikata, we had to kill some men who broke the code. This kid was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I imagine you mean to say that's all there is to it, said Sanan. Well, said Hijikata, he probably saw something, but I doubt he really understands what it was. Even so, this is serious, said Nagakura. We have bigger things to think about. We have to keep this under wraps. If rumors get out that the soldiers of the Shinsengumi are thirsty for blood, that would be problematic. Shinpachi's words made sense, and they all knew it. Hijikata's face looked grim. I think Soji has a point, said Harada. Still, I'll do whatever Hijikata and Kondo tell me to. I think we ought to let him go, said Todo. He looked troubled. It's not like he knows why they went nuts, you know. Wait, what did he mean by that? To be honest, I hadn't really thought about it. Hijikata saw my eyes go wide, and I saw his narrow. They flicked to Todo. Shut it, Heisuke. No sooner were the words out of Hijikata's mouth than Todo clapped both hands over his own. Uh-oh, said Okita. Well, this is going to make it even harder for us to just let you go. I whimpered. A man should always be ready to face death, said Nagakura. You should make your peace with yours. A man? Oh, they thought I was a boy. With everything else that had happened, I'd completely forgotten how I was dressed. Very true, said Harada. A brave death is always an option. When I was young, I committed honourable suicide. Although it didn't really stick, did it, Sano? Said Nagakura. Their jokes were barbaric, but they both broke into raucous laughter at them. Saito did his best to ignore them. Hijikata, since we can't seem to reach a consensus, can I send the child back to his room? As he spoke, Saito turned to look at me. If you hear something you shouldn't while you're here, then we'll have no choice but to kill you, said Saito. Ah, he was right. If I remained with them, then I could easily hear something I wasn't supposed to. I didn't think he'd mentioned it for my sake, only as a possible concern for the Shinsengumi, but I was still glad he'd brought it up. True, said Hijikata. Can you take care of him? Saito nodded. I agree, said Sanan. There are too many careless men here. Come on, Sanan, said Nagakura. What are you looking at me for? That ought to be pretty obvious, said Harada. We're in charge of being careless, especially you, Heisuke. Hey, back off, said Heisuke Todo. It was just a mistake, all right? I could hear Todo's voice rise as everyone turned to look at him. He looked at them for a bit, then turned to me and mumbled in a voice I could barely hear. I'm sorry. I was still afraid that I was about to die, so I couldn't bring myself to tell him no harm had been done. But he looked as though he'd meant what he said, so I gave him an awkward nod. It was the most I could manage. Shall we go? Said Saito. All right. After they had taken me back to my room, I sat there for a time, looking down at my bound hands. The rumours I'd heard had said the Shinsengumi were cruel, vicious men, but they'd seemed much more human than that. Then again, even as I sat there, they were deciding whether or not to kill me. I don't think they want to kill me, but it seems like they think they might have no choice. If I didn't defend myself somehow, I'd most likely be killed. I don't know how I'm supposed to convince them, though. However they might have felt about me, it was clear that their priority was the welfare of the Shinsengumi. Oh, right. They all still thought I was a boy. Perhaps if I told them I was a girl, they might reconsider? Or perhaps they wouldn't. Or perhaps that would make my predicament worse somehow. I had no idea what I should do next. And now we have our very first choice. Do we find a way to escape, or attempt to explain the situation? You'll have to wait till the next episode. Until then, thank you for listening. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.